Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I don't have my mic in. What am I doing? How unprofessional is this show? It's the most professional show. Welcome to another episode of the Moynihan Report. We got a good one today because we have an old pal of mine, and he is the perfect person to talk about some of the events of the day. I woke up this morning to in Israel. You all did. We all woke up this morning to the same thing. To an Israeli attack in Qatar on Hamas targets. There's been some very interesting responses to this. I want to talk to Eli about this. And if you don't know Eli Lake, if you watch this show, you know Eli Lake. If you don't, what's wrong with you? Why are you watching this show? Get your Eli Lake knowledge. Used to be at Bloomberg, used to be with me at the Daily Beast, is now at the Free Press, and the host of one of my favorite podcasts, Breaking History. There are a bunch of these history podcasts out there these days. They're all trying to be like Eli. Eli's is the best, and go and listen to it. It's fantastic. Eli Lake joining us from Washington, D.C. He can't be here. Is that a okay, that's a
It's punk rock Billy Joel.
That's punk rock Billy Joel. I literally thought it was the murderer.
I wore it for you because I know how much you love the Bard from Oyster Bay.
I love the Bard from no, it's because Eli knows that I don't. I'm not a Billy Joel fan. But no, I thought it was the guy that killed the healthcare guy. I'm sorry, that's what I thought it was.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was like, is that what he's wearing?
I'm not gonna wear Mangione. I'm out.
It was a Mangione shirt,
no,
but it's not.
Absolutely not.
Eli, you've been a reporter for many, many years on national security issues, covered the Middle East. When you saw this news this morning, did it surprise you? It actually kind of surprised me. I mean, there's not a lot after the beeper attacks, the attack on Iran, the blowing up the entire leadership of the Houthis in Yemen. But I don't know, for some reason, this one, I was like, okay, so they're going into Qatar, a pretty pinpoint strike. But what do we know about it now? And did this kind of surprise you that this happened?
Well, I usually I'm surprised by these things, but in this time I wasn't, because last week you saw the IDF chief of staff say something along the lines of, we're now going to be taking this to wherever Hamas leaders are, which seemed to be a prelude. So I thought maybe something like that was coming. And I think now, like when President Trump says this is our last offer, like, listen, like, he means it. You know what I mean? Like, and even though it was a kind of a mixed message from the White House saying they didn't like that the attack was in Qatar, but it was good to take out terrorists who shouldn't be in Qatar. Yeah. I'm summarizing Carolyn Leavitt's statement. My sense is that Israel wouldn't have done it if they didn't get at least a yellow light or some tacit.
Well, why don't we play that? I want to play Carolyn Leavitt's statement. I mean, Trump came out sometime after this, with a Truth Social statement, a very concise statement of like 8,000 words. And when you get through it, it's like, kind of a mixed message. Do we have the Caroline Leavitt clip? Let's take a look at this.
Sure. Well, I have a statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal.
However, I mean, look, sovereign state, that seems like a strong.
You got to hear both sides, Michael. It's like you got to hear both sides. On the one hand, bombing an ally, a major non-NATO ally, that's not so great. But we don't like Hamas. They don't like Hamas. They shouldn't have been there.
But look,
it's like a mix. It's a 50-50.
Why don't let's back up one way, because I want to ask you about this. We all know that the Obama administration very famously had a very, very, let's be generous and say difficult relationship with Bibi Netanyahu.
Yes.
There's actually a very good Frontline documentary about this. And when Netanyahu comes to speak to Congress, it just further blew up an irreparable relationship at that point. I don't really understand, and I'm hoping you can help me with this, the Trump administration's relationship with Netanyahu. Because look, I mean, you remember him coming out and saying, we're really pissed off about this stuff. They did, like denouncing Israel for, supposedly breaking a ceasefire, et cetera, and doing this quite publicly, not doing it sort of telegraphing it behind the scenes. And you also have, as you well know, a lot of people within the administration who have more of, shall we say, a Tucker Carlson view of foreign policy. Where does this administration sit vis-a-vis Israel? I mean, what is that relationship like? I mean, it always was suggested that Bibi and Netanyahu, Bibi and Trump were thick as thieves.
Well, I think that this administration in particular, Trump is the decider, and I don't think there is much of a National Security Council at this point. I think he talks to Melania, he talks to Rubio, I think he talks to like a handful of people. One of the people he talks to pretty regularly is Netanyahu. And I think the Trump-Bibi relationship, you could sum it up in that great Queen song, "You're My Best Friend." Like I think they're just two peas in a pod, I mean.
But so what is this? What's the purpose of saying, well, they didn't tell me about this, which is obviously bullshit that they didn't know. And in the statement, he says, I didn't have time to intervene and stop this, but we told the Qataris and they didn't have time either, but we were surprised by this. I mean, you don't buy that, do you?
No, I don't buy that. I mean, listen, I think he has to say it for a few reasons. Let's be real. The Qataris, tried to bribe him with the Air Force One. There are a lot of questionable business deals with the Witkoff family and the Qataris. So there is a kind of, there is a personal interest, I think, in Qatar. And I think that, I didn't like the part of the statement from Levitt, which was the part about how they've been useful as a mediator. The Qataris, they've been playing a double game. What's interesting to me is I feel that, and this is going to sound maybe a little provocative, but I kind of think the Israelis may have done the Qataris a favor in the sense that let's go back 20 years when Qatar started playing their double game and hedging against their alliance with America, because they thought, and a lot of people thought, that Iran and its proxies, the axis of so-called resistance, was a rising power. That was like betting on the strong horse. Okay. The strong horse is on its way to the glue factory right now. Okay. I'm sorry, but look at Lebanon.
Yeah.
You have the Lebanese prime minister saying, "Get out, Hezbollah. We don't want you anymore." That Assad is in Russia. I'm not saying I like the new guy, but Assad's gone. The Houthi leadership was just wiped out. And now this, with Hamas. So I think there's an argument here where it's like, time to reassess. Now, are there people in the Qatari royal family that are true believers? Yes, probably. But that's also true for the Emiratis. It's also true for, at one point, for the Saudis. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean, though, that I think that there's a kind of I think that for the most part, to be blunt, I think that the Qataris are pusillanimous and are basically acting kind of in their best interest. I think they should look around, and they kind of made the wrong bet. Just go in with the rest of the Gulf states. Israel's the rising hegemon. It doesn't make much sense to continue to try to play the double game. And if they did that, my sense is that all would be forgiven. It would be very good for them, and they wouldn't have a stigma attached to them in the West, and they wouldn't be, and the Israelis wouldn't be attacking Hamas in their country, because they would be kicking the rest of the Hamasniks out. So
yeah, I mean, a lot of people within the Israeli military establishment, foreign policy establishment. Sure. It's a story I've covered for years. Talk to me a little bit about that, because I think that the last 2-3 years have been so remarkable when we start by saying, look at this remarkable security failure on October 7th, which is clearly a massive and kind of hugely consequential for both
Yeah.
Israel and everyone in the region. But at the end of this, you have Lebanon, Hezbollah basically destroyed in Lebanon, the Israelis going into Lebanon, the Israelis going after the Iran nuclear program, strikes along with America in Iran. That's two countries. Obviously, what's happened in Gaza, the attacks on the Houthis, where it's the entire Houthi leadership in one place and they blow them all up. So that's Yemen. They've attacked into Syria since the fall of Assad. And this,
And before when Assad,
and before with
they
this
took out
Assad too,
targets. Yeah. They used to go in all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, took out the nuclear facility in Syria a long time ago too, and did the same thing in Iraq. I mean, and now in Qatar. I mean, this projection of power, people tend to forget about it because all we're paying attention to are these kind of word games of what is a genocide, who's making this claim, or is this a real organization, what court says what, and I see the UK saying. Say the government of the UK saying this is all very bad. It's not a genocide. So this constant back and forth of these semantic conversations. Meanwhile, Israel is projecting its military power in a defensive way in all these countries around the region. Where do we land now? I mean, this is a big shuffling of the deck. And so regardless of what people think about Israel, because I mean, obviously you look at these polls of young people in America, not very positive on Israel these days. It's always been the case in Europe. It continues to be the case in Europe. But what is it like in the region when you have the country projecting itself after October 7th and defending itself in a way that I think surprised a lot of people?
In this respect, as October 7th is a horror, obviously, a terrible crime, pogrom. But in some ways, it's analogous to, if you kind of take it back to an American political analogy, that White House Correspondents' Dinner, where Obama decided to start like roasting Trump, who was in the audience. And everybody says that was like when Trump's like, I'm going to run and I'm going to win. And in the process, like if you look at it, it's like that's the first domino. Or we could maybe use another analogy with like the Tom Cotton op-ed at the New York Times and Barry Weiss. There's a kind of like a sequence of events. This horrible thing happens. All the jackals are celebrating. You see it beginning on U.S. college campuses and Western European college campuses, and people are already calling it a genocide against Israel. It looks terrible, but it unleashes this like lethal military, what I call an intelligence superpower. And now look at the region. The axis of resistance is the axis of retreat, the axis of nonsense, the axis of nothing. At this point, it's really going down. And I do think that if the Qataris are not, if they haven't been infected entirely by the bug of political Islam, then I think it's now in their interest to say, all right, well, we gave this a shot. We bet wrong. And now I think there should be an open door for them to sort of like join the rest of the Gulf and get on with the new Middle East. And that is a result of the projection of hard power from Israel. Turkey played a role, of course, in the final blow to Assad's regime. But the ground was softened because of Israeli military might. And I think it's remarkable. Within less than 2 years, a strategy which a lot of smart people thought might work is Iran's strategy of kind of the ring of fire. This, with all these other proxies. It's in ashes. I mean,
we got that wrong, didn't we? I mean, everyone got that wrong in the sense that Israeli planes, American planes are flying over Iranian airspace without any anti-aircraft fire, without any fighter jets up in the air challenging them, no dogfights. Same thing is true of Hezbollah. I mean, let's quote Osama bin Laden in the other direction and say, these were the paper tigers. I mean, the entire region was full of paper tigers who talked a big game. And I got to say, like, the Qatar thing, I'm of sort of mixed feelings about not the strategic value of it. I mean, I think, seeing those videos of the day of October 7th in Qatar, of all these guys in wide suits and short pants
Yeah.
praying and saying, and every single one of them is dead. There's a certain amount of joy that one gets knowing that of these mass murderers. But at the
As
same
the
time,
kids say, FAFO.
yeah, they fucked around and they found out. But it
They
is,
certainly did.
you see this kind of pinpoint strike because you
Yeah.
see the image. It looked like there was, as far as we can tell, were there civilian casualties? Not that we've
Yeah.
been told. And if that happened, we would hear about it immediately. But do you think that this kind of hangs there? Like the Iranians, like, Tucker Carlson, the great foreign policy sage, Tucker Carlson, said that if we're involved in an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, 100,000 people are going to die. It turned out that almost nothing happened at all, maybe down the road. But down the road, the Iranians have been doing that, in Argentinian Jewish community centers and, American barracks in Lebanon. So that's going to continue as it's always continued. But what do you suspect that the Qataris will do and can do? Because they are, as you say, playing this double game.
I think they have to say, they denounce it and they're really upset. Somebody had a tweet saying, something like, when Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Iran responded with a barrage of missiles on Tel Aviv. What will Qatar do? And my answer to that is a 7-part documentary on Al Jazeera. Because they don't, what are they going to do? Which is why, I think they have to kind of get it out of their system, say whatever they're going to say. But if they think about it, this is an opportunity for them. Israel did them a favor. This is an opportunity to kind of reset the deck. What is it about? I mean, first of all, let's just note here. Political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, that's a loser ideology. It doesn't work. You could argue it's working in Turkey, I suppose, but I think Turkey's got a lot of problems and at a huge cost to whatever was there in terms of their quasi-democracy. But this realization that Ikhwan, the political Islam as an ideology, was not something that you could appease. That the Saudis came to that kind of realization, I would say, about 10 years ago, especially with the rise of Mohammed bin Salman. The other Gulf states have kind of followed. The one holdout was Qatar. Okay, so what are you waiting for at this point? What is the benefit? How's the Muslim Brotherhood doing in Egypt under Sisi? This is something that, it's 100-year-old kind of modern Islamist ideology. They do seek to recreate a kind of, global caliphate and restore the glory of the Islamic Empire. They are imperialist in that respect. Where are they now? You know what I'm saying? It's this. It feels a little bit like everybody's talking about, this is the death throes of Israel. This is all just propaganda for Israel. I think Israel's going to come out okay, but I feel like this might be like a 1989 moment for political Islam.
It's a really good point because this is one of the things that nobody discusses, the actual ideology behind things like the attack of October 7th. If you had a group of people that perpetrated an attack across the border on, off the Canadian border on a group of Somali citizens in Minneapolis or Hispanic people, and they were just targeting those people, and they talked endlessly about their racial lineage and how it was weak and had to be destroyed.
Yeah.
We'd be talking about, the rise of white supremacy in the Western Hemisphere and how it's a murderous ideology and it's killing people at 1,200 in the clip.
The Muslim Brotherhood is the white supremacy of Islam. It's Islamic supremacy. And for a long time, and I have to say, there are a number of people who got kind of seduced that there was a moderate opportunity for political Islam. And this was a big idea under George W. Bush. Remember, Hamas was allowed to run in the election after the demise of Arafat, which was a huge mistake because they never disarmed. But now is the time to really look at this and say, this is a dead end ideology. And I think that the region is what's fascinating to me is that you have Western journalists and Western academics who are more all in now with this dead end ideology that a lot of people in the region itself, including in Gaza, we can't really know, how represented, but there's plenty of videos. You can see them on social media. You can find them of just regular Gazans saying, "What have you done?" And my dream is that the final kind of coup de grace in Gaza for Hamas will not be at the hands of the IDF, but will be kind of Mussolini solution. They will see them, kind of their corpses hanging from like a gas station, like we saw at the end of fascist Italy. Because it's really, I mean, like I would say that the most the first victims of the ideology are Muslims and Arabs themselves who have to live under these fanatics.
Yeah, I mean, it's no
So
coincidence that in 2005, when the IDF pulled out of Gaza, there was an
yeah,
election. Hamas won and then fought essentially a civil war against the Palestinian Authority.
yeah. By the way, they barely won. It was a legislative election. It
It
was
was
one
yeah,
election
it was one election, but
17 years ago or
it
whatever.
was
Yeah, it's
one
like
man, one vote, one time. And the reason you have it
exactly
one time is because, as you say, is this stuff popular? I mean, Gary Kasparov always says this about Putin. People say, oh, Putin's very popular in Russia, and his response is always, "How the hell do you know?" There's really no
right.
way of knowing these things in totalitarian and authoritarian societies. I want you to like this is, I hope, a educational episode for a lot of listeners, and you can call in and get on the Zoom and yell at us if you disagree. But can you provide a slight bit of education for people about Qatar? I mean, there's been a lot of conversation recently on both left and the right about AIPAC and people being bought and paid for by Israel, but it's often forgotten that the Qataris spend an extraordinary amount of money in the
Yes.
United States. There's about 7 Qataris. I think the population is 8 when you take out like foreign workers. So it's a very small
Right.
country. They spend an enormous amount of money in the United States and in Europe too. Why? What are they
Yes.
trying to achieve? What is the goal of the Qatari royal family and the Qatari regime? What are they trying to spread?
I think they're trying to normalize a euphemistic way to put it is anti-Zionism, but they're trying to normalize the idea that Israel has no right to exist, that it's a pariah state. And I think they're trying to normalize the idea that Qatar is a very valuable ally because it talks to various dirtbags like Hamas and Iran, et cetera. And that was sort of the idea. But again, what is the strategic goal of that now? I mean, I don't understand. Like, okay, it's not going anywhere. You've managed to pour something like $2 billion over 20 years into many universities in the United States. I mean, one of my favorite examples of this is Northwestern University, which some would regard as the best or the second best journalism program. As a longtime journalist, I think you would agree with me, Michael, that journalism school is not what you
A
should do if
mug's
you want to become
game.
it is a mug's game, absolutely. But my point here is that the Northwestern University, which is a very prestigious journalism school, had a program in the Northwestern campus in Doha where they were like literally working with Al Jazeera, which is, you know, I would call it, it's basically like a state-run media. It was, but it doesn't ever report anything negative about um, Qatar, and it runs unverified libel about Israel, and its correspondents in Gaza have recently been exposed as basically being many of them Hamas operatives. So, I mean, I should say, in the long history, Al Jazeera has done some occasionally done good journalism, but I don't
Yeah.
consider them a
No,
serious.
I mean, I know a
I
lot of
consider them
great
a kind of a
journalists that have worked
propaganda
there,
network.
but I think
Yeah,
there's a difference between the Al Jazeera English and what is broadcast in Arabic. And there's plenty of stuff out there about that, studies,
yeah,
translations of things that are much more political, propagandistic. And, the Al Jazeera
yeah,
English and the very brief AJAM, the Al Jazeera America, had a political bent, but it was much different. You know your market. I mean, Americans are not going to want to watch stuff, even Europeans, that is stuff that is just sounds like heavy-handed Hamas
So
propaganda.
like, why are like, prestigious journalists who get gigs at Northwestern training Al Jazeera as if we're going to try to make them better journalists? I mean, like if something like that with the equivalent of like the Chinese or RT, everybody would be like, this is an outrage. Well, Al Jazeera is the RT of Qatar. RT, of course, being the Russian propaganda network in
Yeah.
English. The difference is that there's no prestigious schools that are training RT journalists in Moscow,
Yeah.
but Northwestern is doing that. And that's just one small example. They have retainers at the best law firms in Washington, the best PR firms. There's a ton of money that Qatar just throws around, not just in America, also in Europe. They just signed a huge deal in the UK. And this is an attempt to try to purchase influence, and that influence has gone to try to basically delegitimize the right of Israel to exist, among other things. So,
Yeah.
at this point, I'm like, I think the gig is up. And the other element here is that there is clearly, from a PR perspective, it looks pretty grim from Israel. A lot of the world thinks Israel is, I don't know, monstrous. But I think that it's so the libel is so extreme at this point that Israelis that I talk to are just like, well, the only way out is through. Like, what, like, is there going to be is someone going to stand up and say, you know what? Israel was committing genocide in Gaza, but it restrained from going after Hamas leaders in Qatar. So they're not all bad. That's ridiculous. Just do what you got to do at this point. And that's, by the way, your own damn fault, you dumb leftists. Like, you push the issue so much that the Israelis at this point have stopped caring.
Yeah.
And that's I know Peter Beinart here would say something like, "Oh, well, that's evidence of the corrosion of Israel's soul." I think it's evidence of Israel's resilience because it's in an existential war and it has to win.
Well, I want to get into the position that Israel's in and the idea of going into Gaza City and whether that is a smart idea or a bad idea. But we have a lot of people that have questions. So I want to bring in Roger. Do we have Roger who has a question for Eli Lake? Hi, Roger.
Hi, Roger.
How you doing? I just Yaakov Katz just wrote a brilliant book entitled "Why While Israel Slept." He described how Israel knew everything that was going on in Iran, but very little as to what was going on in Gaza. And they were under the misconception that they could just pay off Hamas for the Qatar and give the Gazans jobs in Israel, and that Hamas would have no reason or no motivation to attack Israel. In the meantime, behind the scenes, Hamas was building a huge infrastructure, not just militarily, but economically, right under the Israelis' nose, and the Israelis knew nothing about it. And it's an incredible book, and I recommend both of you have Yaakov Katz on your.
I have a copy
podcast.
of it, and
Yeah.
I've seen interviews with him. I haven't read it yet, but I
Brilliant
would
book.
point out that there were analysts, lower level analysts, who were tracking the preparations for the attack,
Yeah,
and those
he talked
warnings,
about
I think,
that.
were ignored. Yeah.
Yes,
So
we talked about that.
I think it was a what the Israelis called the conceptia, which is they had
Yeah.
the wrong set of assumptions about what Hamas wanted and what they were trying to do. And the lesson is, when homicidal maniacs say they want to kill you, you should listen to them.
I
Yeah,
agree. But the other,
Go ahead,
sorry.
Roger. No, go ahead, Roger.
The other point I want to make is I think I'm highly critical of Israel for not having better public relations, not having any person. In the old days, they used to have Alan Dershowitz on all the time defending Israel. Now it's kind of long in the tooth.
Yeah.
But they need somebody on there because all you see on TV is attacks on Israel and no one defending them. And I blame the Israeli government for not having better public relations for that. My third point,
third
I'm
point.
sorry.
No, it's all right, Roger. Let's take that one here. Thank you for that. Yeah, I want to ask you about that Eli, because I think Roger makes a good point, and the point that we've all heard made, and probably all made it ourselves, is that it is, shall we say, an unpopular position these days to defend Israel. But as you pointed out, Eli, when I was probably 7 days into the war, 7 days after the attacks of October 7th, I'd already been hearing the claims of genocide. So it kind of undermines them these days when you hear this from the very beginning. Seems to be part of a strategy, but it seems to be working, though. But Eli, to Roger's point, I mean, an enormous amount of sophistication in Israel when it comes to technology, when it comes to, military technology, intelligence capability. Why can they not mount a better defense? And let me play devil's advocate here and say, is it because there isn't a good, proper defense to be mounted because they are waging an unjust campaign?
Can I attack the premise a little bit?
Sure. It was designed to be attacked, Eli.
Yeah, okay. I agree, Roger, that if you just look at some of the elite media spaces, that Israel's not doing well from a PR perspective, and add to that, we live in a kind of era of balkanized media where people are in different silos, and there are a lot of popular silos now, like I don't know, Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, and these other YouTube shows and stuff that are just 100% anti-Israel. They don't really have the other side on. All that's true, but I think that I believe the kind of anti-Israel sentiment right now in the West reminds me a lot of the moral panic of defund the police, trans youth gender medicine, believe all women, climate change extinction. I mean, this is part of the omni-cause at the moment. And what we've seen in our politics is that there is a backlash once people begin to feel that there isn't, because the same dynamics exist. Matt Taibbi had a really good piece about this, which is that the pro-Israel side wants to debate. The anti-Zionist side wants to demonize you, wants to marginalize you, wants to anathematize anybody who dissents and won't say the magic words genocide, Holocaust, whatever. So in my view, that kind of social pressure, that kind of moral blackmail, which is part of the grammar of these moral panics that we've seen in recent years, does create a kind of backlash, because it means that people become what Natan Sharansky called double thinkers, which is they're thinking one thing and they're saying something else. And I think that if you just sort of look at it, you can just look at the trajectory. There isn't a famine in Gaza. People have changed the definition of genocide to meet this one particular thing. People are saying things that are obviously not true. There are people who are constantly repeating the same line, that this is the most destructive war we've ever seen, when people still remember the Syrian civil war, when far more people were died and there was far less concern or care for civilians. There's never a mention of the fact that Hamas doesn't wear uniforms, that it built an entire underground military city beneath their civilian infrastructure, that it fires rockets and hides ammunition in schools and mosques and residential homes. All of these things, after a while, like, I think that the reason you're not hearing it as much is because there are certain people who are still afraid that they're going to be labeled as one of the bad people if they say it. And that dynamic, again, who would have, if we were to have this conversation 3 years ago, who would have predicted that Malcolm Gladwell would get up and say, as he did, that he was cowed into lying about transgender athletes?
Yeah.
But that's what I'm kind of getting at here, which is that I'm not so sure I would believe that this is how it's going to be from here on after.
Yeah.
I think that they're using moral blackmail to stoke a moral panic, and I would sort of treat it like that. I mean, how ridiculous does it sound now when you look back and you can find all these people, lots of leading Democrats, talking about defund the police? How embarrassing is it that Kamala Harris was raising money for people who were arrested in Minneapolis for rioting and serious crimes, raising money for like a bail fund for them? So that, again, people kind of get caught up in it, and we think in the moment that this is sort of the new way, and this is no one will ever think the old way again, but that's not how the world works. And I think they're going to see something like that with Israel, especially since I do think that Israel's going to come out of this having strategically transformed the Middle East. And over time, once the war kind of dies down, there'll be space to begin to kind of make those arguments. The other thing that'll happen, because I do think that Israel's going to win, is that you're going to start to get real evidence of the sadism of Hamas, and that is something that you can also push out there. So you're never going to persuade, people like Glenn Greenwald. You're never going to persuade the true believers. There are always going to be certain kind of baseline of anti-Zionists, but I think it's going to be a lot of normies who are going to sort of say, yeah, I kind of went along to get along, but now that I look at it, boy, that was crazy what we were saying back then.
Eli, I know you listened to an episode of the Fifth Column, the other show that I do. It's a great
I did.
Show. Have you guys heard that one? It's really good. And in that, we got an email from somebody who was like, "Why don't you talk about this anymore?" And the most amazing thing about that email, and we read it on the show, was the sense that to be on the side of the oppressed, in this case, the oppressed being the Palestinians, is an unpopular position and something you can't get out there in the media these days. And this has been the line for a very long time. And in that
that's
email,
the one that called me the piss pig?
Correct.
Or are you
I
the
think
piss
I
pig
think
or am
I
I the
might
piss
have,
pig?
I think I might have added that to the email just to spice it up, because that's what I think about you, really. But I don't.
There you
but
go.
the thing about that email was that person said, "Do you not talk about this issue anymore, or sort of defend the Israeli position because you're afraid of being canceled?" I mean, that's a bit of a change, right? I mean, that's the idea that, like, if you speak up about this isn't the popular position now, and you're afraid of going against the tide, and the tide is definitely not in Israel's direction. But I think one of the other things that I would add to that is the fact that it's sort of bipartisan in a way that it wasn't in the past. Republicans were you had a lot of Democrats that were pro-Israel, and you had a lot of Republicans, more Republicans. They were just generically going to be the party that was going to be more favorable to Israel in most kind of foreign policy conflicts. That's not the case anymore. As I said before, within the administration, that's not the case. Within the MAGA movement, it's certainly not the case. I mean, you see Marjorie Taylor Greene going on every day about the Zionists and AIPAC and all this stuff. So
I'm shocked. The woman who thinks they're Jewish space lasers.
Well, she's right about some things, Eli.
Against Israel. I mean, like, I think this is a blessing, okay? I think that Tucker Carlson is somebody who I used to think was a great broadcaster, and sadly has ventured into a kind of wonderland and a rabbit hole of unreality. And
on Thursday, Eli, I want to give some free press, not a reference to where you work, but to Tucker Carlson, because on Thursday it is another anniversary of September 11th, increasingly forgotten as these anniversaries go forward, and you can expect that. Tucker Carlson is releasing his 85-part documentary on how 9/11 was an inside job. The same man who, by the way, walked out of an event that he was emceeing for Ron Paul in, I don't know, was it 2007 or 8, when the lunatic former governor of Minnesota, Jesse Ventura, said 9/11 was an inside job on stage. And he said, "I can't be a part of this," and walked away from the hosting duties in the middle of the event, and is now producing documentaries about this stuff. I mean, by the way, can I ask you a question about that? Do you believe this? I mean, it seems that that lady, what is that lady called? Candace, is it Owens or Owen? I don't know. I give a shit, but is it Owens? Plural. It's Soundman says plural. Candace Owens, who seems to be having a full break with reality. There was a clip that I saw of her today talking about the Stanford prison experiment and how the numbers that they used was some Kabbalistic numerology, and there's a missing person in the Stanford prison experiment, which, by the way, was bullshit to begin with, and it might be Brigitte Macron, who is actually a man. And it went so far, I was like, I think this woman needs help. This is kind of crazy. And so in that sense, I think that there's a kind of mental breakdown. But in the Tucker sense,
let me put it like this. I think that.
Do you think people are just, or are they fishing for clicks?
There's a real risk right now that the Republican Party will lose the mental patient vote.
Yeah.
Because I just think that, like you can see it. Like, listen, Tucker, Candace, they're going off into Alex Jones territory.
Yeah.
Now, America has always had conspiracy theorists, as you know. Conspiracy theories are fun we're just in a bull session in the dorm room. And, for people who like to read, there's plenty of material and it can, kind of get you, it can be entertaining,
Yeah.
but this is the brand, and I don't think you can have a viable political party. So I'm not worried about people who are continuing to make outlandish statements. We live in an era where uh, social media and the internet and everything else makes all of this one click away. But there's always been a contingent of Americans who've believed all kinds of crazy things. Nothing is as it seems. There's always some man behind the curtain. And of course, that leads you to, oh, the Jews.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not like
usually ends there.
a political threat. I would be more concerned if you started seeing more mainstream people on the right, making the kind of, I think, defensible kind of humanitarian case, which is that, yeah, we agree that Hamas is a horrible terrorist organization and that it's a real threat to Israel's security. But boy, the price is so high. Look at all the kids.
Yeah.
Look at the infrastructure, and it's so
Yeah,
sad.
sure.
That is a fair kind of argument,
Absolutely
and
fair
that's a
argument,
serious
yeah.
one.
And I take that, by
it's-
the way, and I want people to know this. I mean, in that email that we were talking about that I got for the Fifth Column show, there is the person who was taking shots at you. And I got to say that knowing you as long as I have, and we've had many discussions about this, so when something like this comes up, it's great to have you on. But I know that you care about that stuff and take it very seriously. And it's why I was going to ask you this question. And we'll get to another caller in a second. But, going into Gaza City and saying we have to finish off Hamas, we're not getting the hostages back. These are also very, very serious and very real concerns. I talked to an Israeli today, that'll be coming out on the other show, about this. And he said Hirsch Pollen's mother had come to his university and she had a number on and it said, 85 days or something.
Yeah.
And she said, let's hope it doesn't get to 100. And he said, we're over 700 now. These are very, very real concerns. And every Israeli, regardless of what they think of Netanyahu, want those people who have been, tortured underground for 3 years now. They want them better, 2.5 years now. But is this, in your estimation, a smart way of going about it? I mean, obviously, we all have our opinions of these things, and they don't mean very much when you're not in uniform or you're not a civilian in Gaza. But it obviously is not sitting well with anyone in Europe. France condemned Israel today, as they have done many times in the past. The UK, Keir Starmer's government did too. Do you think that beyond just the PR stuff, that the Netanyahu government is making massive strategic mistakes here too? Because this is just the pulverization of an already pulverized landscape.
I think it's a terrible choice. And I
You
think
do?
that I think it's a terrible choice. I think you have to say, do we save the hostages and allow for a remnant of Hamas to remain and claim victory and risk another October 7th and more hostages down the road? Or do we try our best to try to finish the job and extirpate these demons from Hamas, from Gaza? I think it's a hard choice, and I'm not Israeli, so I can respect people on both sides, and there has been clearly a debate on this. I do not think that the argument that Netanyahu is only doing this because he wants to extend the war for his political career or that he doesn't care about the hostages. I think that it's a very, very hard choice. And I also think that there is a lazy kind of trope that all of the hostage families speak in unison. That's not true. There are plenty of hostage families that we just saw something in the Wall Street Journal that think that if Hamas is still standing after the war, then this great sacrifice will have been in vain.
Yeah.
I think Israelis are torn in this respect as well. So it's not some easy decision, so it's hard for me to say. And I do think that there also has to be some consideration for, okay, well, what is the transition to the next people who are going to govern Gaza because it shouldn't be Israel. And I do think it doesn't help to have a component of the coalition in Israel right now talking like they want to resettle Gaza, which is, I think,
Yeah, I mean, that's
very,
the Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
that's a stupid idea. By the way, it's also
They're
not what Ron
lunatics.
Dermer and Netanyahu are saying.
Ron
And,
Dermer
you
has
know,
said that?
no, Ron Dermer has said there's no plans to
Oh,
resettle
okay. He
Gaza.
has not yet.
He has not said it. No, no. So I mean, but but like I think you have to finish the job. I mean, the sacrifice has been so much in terms of the lives lost of IDF soldiers, in terms of the disruption to Israel's society, its economy, and everything else, to its international standing, that you can't end the war with anything that resembles Hamas sticking around.
Yeah, and look, people don't understand or don't often think about this. It's very hard to wage wars like this to their completion, regardless of how you determine what that completion is, in a pluralistic democratic society, right? The Russians don't have to worry about a groundswell of people kicking Putin out of office because they're sending their kids into the wood chipper in Donetsk. You don't have to worry about that because you operate in a dictatorship, in an authoritarian regime. The Israelis have to worry about not only the political consequences of this, but also just the exhaustion of people that have been called up for reserve duty for enormous amounts of time. And there's some kind of rebellion that you see reports of people are exhausted by it. They don't want to go back, and you can't blame them. I mean, it's an ugly, horrible business. War is not just this one. Okay, who do we have next? Gabriel? Do we have Gabriel? Hi, Gabriel. How's it going, buddy?
Gabi, my dear friend, by the way.
You know Gabi?
Oh, I love Gabi.
Gabi doesn't he likes the mute button. Gabi, we can unmute you, and that do we have Gabi? You're not getting anything from his mic? No, I think it's muted on your side, Gabi. I like saying Gabi, but no,
this is going to be a good question. He's a brilliant.
Yeah, no. I said, do you want to make up his question because Gabi appears to be having a meltdown because his microphone's not. Is it plugged in, Gabi? Do we have somebody else you want to go to and come back to Gabi when he figures it out? We're not going to forget about you. We will never forget about Gabi. Aaron, we'll go to Aaron and then we'll come back to you, Gabi, while we sort that audio thing. Aaron, how's it going, buddy?
Great. Thank you. Another fantastic show. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, yeah, perfect.
Oh, great. Thanks. I did want to swing back a little bit on the whole Qatar dimension, because I don't think we ever really talk about that, which is, for the United States, for U.S. CENTCOM, Al Udeid Data Air Base there is the home base of the 379th Expeditionary Squadron, which is basically, or wing, which is our most diverse strike wing we have in the whole inventory. It's a collection it's basically a grab bag of every air platform we have, so that you can run basically any mission across all of CENTCOM, which is made up of over 4 or 5 million square miles and covers almost 600 million people. So, Qatar represents something really fundamentally strategic. And given that Fifth Fleet is in Bahrain, and all of our expeditionary strike forces are all within that region, and it's CENTCOM for a reason. It's in the center, right? So you go east and you go west at pretty equal levels until you get to the Pacific. So I do think that might rub people wrong, that our realist hard power is that important that we will 400 other issues, but we will. And also Qatar is, a member of the GCC. Qatar generates over 150 billion a year in hydrocarbons. GCC, $1.5 trillion. And so that's the realist power of why Qatar matters and why we will accept Northwestern or whoever, Cal State Northridge or whatever, having some, program, because it's in our fundamental strategic interest. And obviously the other two actors in the world, the Russians and the Chinese, we don't want them under any circumstance to have any breach into that region, and we will trade Northwestern or Cal State Northridge's journalism program, every day and Sunday and 6 times a Sunday for it.
Well,
And,
okay.
and Aaron,
I wanna
also
push
just
back.
one quick thing that will also, the administration will also pretend to be offended by this today, which is, as Eli points out, is surely not the case and absolutely got at the very minimum a yellow light. But go for this operation. But go ahead, Eli.
Well, first of all, I think, the decisions of the United States government are different than the decisions of a prestigious university. Prestigious universities don't have to make those partnerships. They have the luxury of, they can decide that, well, we don't want to be associated with this, this regime, and that, has this cozy relationship with these jihadists. So that's the first point I would make. And if there was more shame in the university and the academy in general about aligning yourself with political Islam, if we understood that Qatar's alliance with Iran and Qatar's alliance with Hamas is the equivalent of aligning themselves with like the fascists in the 30s, then I think that there's, that they wouldn't do it because of the reputational harm. The reason they're able to do it is because, sadly, the academy is chock full of midwits who think that political Islam is like, somehow sexy and revolutionary or something. I don't know.
Well, but also they have the right, because of that that relationship we have. The Qataris have the permission, right? We've given them the
but I'm saying
permission to operate strategically in the United States.
Yes. Okay. And then the other thing I would just say about that is that on Al Udeid Air Base, I think the Qataris need the United States more than the United States needs Qatar.
I disagree with that, because we'd have to create that base if and that's not an easy.
We're very good at building military bases, and there's plenty of other countries in the region.
There aren't plenty of other countries that we could safely put 100 aircraft strike wing of literally every single strike platform we have, including the Global Strike Command, including nuclear weapons.
Why not cut a deal with the Kurdistan Regional Government of Iraq? I mean, I can think of a
you
bunch
want
of other places.
you really want B-2s flying out of Kurdistan? Like, I don't think that makes.
I would love for B-2s to be flying out.
Okay, I don't think
you're asking the wrong guy.
Absolutely, you're asking the wrong guy. I love the Kurds.
No, it's fine. Turkey has a veto, and we can't overcome that veto. No, just like no one else on earth can overcome Turkey's veto, and everyone delusionally believes we can, and we can't. So you stay out of Turkey's backyard.
The Turks can veto where we put our military bases. They are NATO
Absolutely.
members.
They vetoed 3 divisions coming into the Iraq War from the north, which
they vetoed it going through their territory.
Which is the only way you could get the forces into Iraq, which was the whole point. And you still need
I think we could figure out ways to get. I mean, listen,
I have an air base there, Incirlik already. I served at Incirlik. I know that airbase. There's no way you could support what we have there.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I just want.
I don't think we should allow Qatar, which benefits greatly from having an American tripwire, to be the dominant in this relationship. They are our client, and there have been serious think tank papers actually on alternatives to Al Udeid, which I found persuasive. Now, I respect that you served in Incirlik, and I get it. I've been to Incirlik myself, and I agree with you that, but I don't think it's the Al Udeid is the one indispensable base.
Look, Bahrain has the juice in the Fifth Fleet conversation the same way. So there's this concept in international relations, when you are this insanely small fry, and you have this very strategic strip of territory, you do have a certain power, actually.
There is leverage, but what I'm saying is that I can't imagine that there wouldn't be alternatives. But more importantly, if you think of sort of the big picture, what are we seeing right now? I mean, one thing that I think was overlooked: the Israelis conducted airstrikes on Damascus and military positions in Syria earlier this year in order to send a warning shot to stop a kind of ethnic cleansing of Druze Christians. Now, that used to be the job of America. Now it's the job of the blue and white. I think that we might be in a position now, what we're seeing with Israel's reach and Israel's ability, and Israel's, I think what we'll see is a deepening alliance structure with the Saudis and other Gulf states, a potential where Israel can pick up some of that strategic slack from America, which would be a good thing from the perspective of um, the restrainers and the people who think that we are too engaged in the Middle East. This strikes me as a fairly good thing for like the J.D. Vance wing of the Republican Party, and I don't particularly see why we would oppose it. Meanwhile, as I said earlier, this is a great opportunity for Qatar. Let them get it out of their system. But like, what are you doing with Hamas? What are you getting out of it? They're not going to
Islamic
win
finance. They're getting Islamic finance.
from
They become
Hamas.
no, from the credibility they get. So Islamic finance, the third, fourth, fifth tier of the finance system, that's the underground, think of as mafia finance in
Sure.
that world. And Qatar basically is a superpower in that.
Well,
Okay, great.
hold on. I want to, because we're running out of time here. I want to see
Okay,
if Gabby got
let's do
his mic working. But thank you, Aaron. Always.
Thank you. Good.
He's always
Good
smarter
comments,
than.
man.
Yeah, he's like a smart guy. Why doesn't he have a show on this network? Why don't you just fire me and hire him? I can go home now, right? Can we do that? Can you guys arrange that? On top of that, by the way, I want to say that I want to have a conversation. We're running out of time, but I wanted to have a conversation about the 1,200 people in Hollywood who signed this letter saying they wouldn't work with Israeli. I mean, it's funny because the Saudis are putting a lot of money into Hollywood, and they're very narrowly focused on this. And to me, the question that Aaron brings up is let's revisit and re-debate Gene Kirkpatrick's dictatorships and double standards, and when and how one should work with shitty regimes around the world. But let's see if we have Gabby. Do you have your mic back? He's wearing a Meet His Murder shirt too. Can we hear you?
Yeah. Hi, Eli. Michael, nice to see you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Nice Smith shirt. Go ahead.
By the way, heaven knows I'm miserable now.
Well, it's not today of all days.
No, I'm walking on sunshine, baby.
You went from Morrissey to Katrina in the waves in one. All right.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of the original Moynihan Report, and now this. So
Look at
it's
that.
just
You're one of the three. Yeah, you're number 4 of the people who actually understand the reference. But go ahead, Gabby.
Yeah, and I'm a masshole as well. So everything is in
The
sync.
stars are aligning. Can I ask you, because I don't give a shit about our listeners, where in Mass are you from?
A little town called Groveland. Have you ever heard of it?
That's not even real. That's like
It's
in
next to
Narnia.
Haverhill.
Oh,
Next
it's
to
in
Haverhill.
Haverhill. Oh, it's like a principality of Haverhill.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Laura.
but
It's Lowell.
that's not
Lowell
a,
and
that's-
Laura.
Sorry, you actually stumped me on a
Merrimack.
Massachusetts town. So sorry, continue. Go ahead.
Right on the Merrimack. Anyway, I was going to ask about the tensions and divisions in MAGA, but that was already touched on. And then Eli went and talked a little bit about J.D. Vance, which I was also curious about, relatedly in terms of how it's going to affect things when Israel wins like this, like with the beepers, and then last summer when I happened to be over there in the bomb shelters, but that's neither here nor there. And as it will continue to go on winning, as it must, and as it can, and as I believe that it will. Since you talked about that a little already, maybe I could pose it at another level. My question: you guys are in a world that fascinates me, the world that you talk about on the Fifth Column all the time, Michael, the world of high end and low end journalism, I guess. But at the high end, what's going to happen to people who have kind of flaked off and gone anti-Israel? Israelis are genocidal, baby killers, intelligent people. Some of them, influential, possibly in the administration, maybe in the next administration. If and when Israel keeps winning, what about an outlet like Unheard, where there's been some disturbingly anti-Israel stuff lately? Even they've been leaning towards Mamdani and some of their things, which is a different question, but in my head, it's kind of related. When the good guys keep winning, what do the smart people that you guys know, who you don't have to name, who have flaked off, what's going to become of the intelligent Tuckers?
Let me. I want to throw this to Eli too, because you talk about the Mamdani, kind of the move towards Mamdani from a certain kind of section of people at Unheard, the British publication. That's because of somebody that Eli and I know very well, and who was once very different politically, a guy named Sohrab Amari. And I like Sohrab a lot. He's a great guy, but he's
Me too.
I do too. That's why I didn't want to name. That's what
no,
I'm
it's
talking
fine.
about.
No, I'll say nice things about Sohrab, despite the
I
fact
love
that
him. I love
his
the guy, but
politics
I
have gone goofy.
can't.
Yeah,
I love him, but I don't know what he's doing.
I think that it will.
Gabi, he's on a journey.
He's on a journey. I don't know where that journey ends, but maybe he'll convert to Islam. Who knows? At the end of the journey, as Lionel Trilling said. But I'll tell you what. I think that it'll all be forgotten about in so many ways because we have short memories always, and now in this day and age, they're destined to be only shorter. But recall, I always point out Joan Baez, the folk singer Joan Baez, who was up there on the front lines on the ramparts of opposing the war in Vietnam, and then decided in 1978, I think, to take out a full-page ad in the New York Times and say, "Hey guys, what's happening? We cared about all the Vietnamese people. Now they're boat people. Now they're going to re-education camps. Do we still care about this stuff?" The same thing is true. I saw a clip the other day of Martin Sheen on Phil Donahue talking about the glorious Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua. That, when Daniel Ortega...
Jed Bartlett was for the Sandinistas?
Yes, he was. He was pro. He went down there for a tour.
Oh, man. I'll never vote for that guy again.
But the crazy thing about it is Ortega loses an election in 89 or 90, and now is back, and now is, worse than he ever was. And no one ever mentions Nicaragua. All these things are forgotten. Israel is a little more central to American policy and American life. And, I'm in New York City, the largest Jewish population in one city outside of Tel Aviv. So it's always part of our political discourse, and it always will be. And I think there's a reason for that, and a justified reason for that. But we have amazingly short memories. And also, people don't really care anymore. I mean, the number of people that work for Donald Trump who have called him a Nazi, Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about that. It's like you change your mind. The political winds have shifted. And for those who actually believe in things and actually care about stuff, it is dispiriting. It's incredibly depressing when you realize that everybody in this business, not everybody, a lot of people in this business are amazingly mercenary. And they'll switch, on a dime because, well, this is where the party's going. I want to go in that direction. Now, I think maybe I'm skeptical of Israel when I was very, very different. I mean, all of these people, so many people at a certain age, those of a certain age after 9/11, I mean, the number of them that supported the Iraq War, I mean, an enormous number of them. They're of that vintage. So people change their politics all the time.
Here tonight?
Was that?
Anyone tonight who supported the Iraq War?
No, none of us.
I supported the Iraq War.
Yeah,
but no one cares.
No, it's like, and it's also people like.
I'm glad Uday Hussein is not in charge of Baghdad right now. Call me crazy.
Yeah, but you were a big Qusay fan, Eli. You didn't like Uday.
Well,
that was the thing.
Qusay was a more moderate Ba'athist. Anyway,
but I'll throw that to Eli. But I think it's ultimately true that if you have baggage, political baggage, or if if your political position has gone out of fashion, even if you've changed to that political position, and then it goes out of fashion again, people don't really hold you to account on that. I mean, somebody posted a video of someone today, somebody I know, and they were making this point that I was like, oh, that's great that they've come back to that position. And it turned out it was from 2 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, 2 years ago. And it like that is just not an issue for people. I told this story the other day, somebody I'm very good friends with, who has joined the Trump administration. Absolutely shocking to me that he joined the Trump administration. Just not even somebody who I would expect to join any administration. I said, the tariff stuff is crazy. And we were at dinner, and he accused me of zombie Reaganism for disliking tariffs, for disliking taxes on products coming into this country. And I said, you would have, recoiled if anyone said that to you 6 months ago. And he said, yeah, I know. And I was like, man, it happens so damn fast. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens that fast in the other direction again. And people don't care. They just don't care. And you can see that from the entire lineup of the Trump administration. I mean, J.D. Vance called him a Nazi, right? J.D. Vance worked for David Frum. J.D. Vance wrote for Commentary. No one even remembers that now unless you're these dorks like me and Eli. So, dork, Eli, what do you think about that?
Well, the one thing I would say is that there's two different kind of versions of this. There's the old cliche, which is that leftists think the world is too good for America, and conservatives or the right thinks that America's too good for the world, but they kind of land on the same policies.
Yeah.
I think that though what you're seeing on the left, like I look at like I don't know if anybody saw the Palestine Youth Movement Conference in Michigan where Rashida
Yeah.
Tlaib's
Yeah.
gave that crazy speech where I thought, it closed my eyes, I thought I was listening to Ulrika Meinhof. And, you know, like that, I think is a loser with most Americans. And I like to sort of say this is that if you're coming at this from the left and your issue is that Israel's a settler colonial state, I like to say, you know what else? You know who else is a settler colonial state? America. And America's like America. Americans like America. So, I mean, I disagree. I don't think Israel's a settler colonial state because Jews have nowhere else to go. It's bad history. It's, you know, you read one chapter of a Frantz Fanon book and you think you know something. But the bottom line is that, like, this stuff plays very well in bubbles that are important in kind of you know, the elite, the commanding heights of the culture. It plays very well at universities, plays really well in newsrooms, plays really well, you know, among TV producers and among filmmakers and things like that. But it, I think, is an alienating message when it comes to the rest of the country. And if you get an AOC Mamdani ticket in 2028, you know, I think you're going to see kind of a Reagan Mondale sweep because
Yeah,
I just don't
it's-
think that no one's and by the way, Democrats understand this. I just they seem like kind of powerless to stop it in the same way that like sane people in New York City understand that the best chance of beating Mamdani would be to sort of narrow his to only have him go up against one opponent. And they just it's like watching a slow train wreck. Like it's not going to happen. We're going to have Adams, Mamdani, Cuomo, and Curtis Sliwa. So I mean, like, so I don't know, like I sort of see the political power matters, and just like Trump winning in 2024 had this weird effect, even though I generally think that culture kind of precedes politics, as a lot of conservatives would, but there was an effect of the political win on the culture in that like people could say retard again. It was suddenly like the whole trans youth gender movement combined, by the way, with the Supreme Court victory. There's a series of things that kind of happened at once, but like the culture changed and we're no longer in that bubble.
Well, I tell you one
don't-
thing before we go running a
Yeah.
little long here. I'm just going to say this that you know the Mamdani forces, the AOC forces, they should be very careful about learning the wrong lessons from Trump because the thing is, you say, well, he can't freeze the rent. It's an impossibility and it won't happen. I think that's true. He's not going to start, state-run, city-run grocery stores. That'll be a total disaster for a variety of very obvious reasons. But, look at Trump. We didn't believe that he was going to do any of these things, that he was going to even win, and he won, and he's doing all these crazy things that we didn't suspect he would actually have the stones to do. I think that you can take the wrong lesson from that and say, well, we can, if we do the kind of Trump thing and we're way over the top, much like Trump is very, very performative and kind of extreme in all these ways, and then we can kind of slowly push the culture to us. I think that's a losing bet because I don't think it's the same thing on the left.
I want to reaffirm what you just said, Michael, because the difference is, and Trump is doing a lot of things that are making me unsettled. I don't like this talk about sending the National Guard to Chicago over the, there's a number of things. I didn't like the thing he did against the law firms, even though I thought the law firms, acted unethically. And I could go on. I don't like the tariffs either. But the difference is that Trump's brand is, I love America and I want to bring us back to a normal America. AOC's brand is, I want to bring socialism to America and I hate America. And I just think that that's a big thing that you kind of have to keep in mind. And when Obama ran, and there are a lot of people who would argue, and there is some truth to this, that Obama imposed a fairly radical agenda, but Obama packaged himself, especially in the beginning of his career, but then also in the 2012 election, What did he run on? He ran on like, they believe in a mighty God in blue state America, mighty God in red state America. In 2012, GM is alive and Osama bin Laden is dead. So even if you want to argue that Obama was like, pretty progressive and more progressive than where most Americans were, which I agree, that he packaged himself in a way that connected. Mamdani, is he packaging himself in that way? We'll see. I mean, I guess recently he said he doesn't want to say globalize the Intifada anymore. I mean, that's a very low bar. Congratulations. But like, you know, is that what they're gonna are they gonna moderate? I mean, you sometimes see signs for this with AOC. I think after the 2024 election, she removed the pronouns from her Twitter profile.
Yeah.
Okay. Baby steps, but like you have to sort of think though, fundamentally, they've come to power so far. They've come to prominence. The squad's come to prominence by, saying the horror part out loud.
And not because of any huge legislative victories either.
No.
Eli Lake. Check out the podcast. Breaking History is fantastic.
The latest one is on James Jesus Angleton.
Oh, James episode. Jesus Angleton. Fascinating. We've talked about him many times. You should check that out. Check out the previous ones too. And I also want to say that I started a contest about 5 minutes ago, and Gabriel is the winner of the best call-in ever because he's from Massachusetts, was wearing a Smith shirt and listens to the Fifth Column. I mean, if you can hit those three things, you win the prize. What do you get? I don't know. Send me an email. I'll figure it out. But right now, best caller of all time. Best guest of all time is always Eli Lake, my pal. Even when he's wrong about things, I love to have him on. Check him out over at the Free Press. And you guys check us out right here at the YouTube channel at the Moynihan Report. Go subscribe, watch the other stuff, etc. We got a bunch of new great episodes coming up, a couple that I'm very excited about. That makes it sound like there's a couple that I'm not excited about, but there's a couple that I'm really excited about, all forthcoming. So we will see you over at the YouTube channel at the Moynihan Report. And thanks for joining us tonight. We'll see you on Thursday.